The world ended not with a bang, but with a groan. It was a sound that shouldn't exist, a deep, resonant shudder that traveled through the 1,000 feet of steel beneath Elara's bare feet and climbed directly into her bones. One moment, she was 16, invincible, leaning against the railing of the luxury ocean liner Odysseus, and watching the moon paint a silver road across the endless, black Atlantic. The next, the universe tilted. The groan was followed by a jolt so violent it sent her stumbling, her cheek scraping against the cold railing. The festive string quartet on the upper deck screeched into silence. For a heartbeat, there was nothing but the hum of the ship's engines. Then the hum changed, faltered, became a labored, discordant whine. And then the screaming started. Elara's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird in a cage of bone. This wasn't right. This was the Odysseus, the unsinkable marvel of modern engineering. Her father, a man who believed wealth could insulate them from all of life's unpleasantness, had said so himself when he'd booked this family bonding cruise to try and bridge the chasm that had opened since her mother's death. Elara, his voice, sharp with a fear she'd never heard from him before, cut through the rising panic. He emerged from the crowd of confused, elegantly dressed passengers, his tuxedo jacket askew, his hand gripping the arm of Elara's 7-year-old brother, Leo. Leo's face was a pale moon, his eyes wide with terror, clutching his worn, stuffed octopus, Squiggles. "What was that, an earthquake?" a woman shrieked. "We've hit something," a man bellowed. "I felt it down in the casino." The ship's public address system crackled to life, but the voice was strained, laced with a panic it was trying desperately to conceal. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is the captain. We have experienced a minor impact. There is no cause for alarm. As a precaution, please proceed calmly to your muster stations. Life jackets are under your..." The transmission died, with a burst of static. "Minor impact?" Elara's father, Alastair, spat the words. His financier's mind, built on assessing risk and spotting lies, saw through the platitude instantly. The deck was already tilting. Not much, just a few degrees, but on a ship this size, it was a declaration of catastrophe. The tilt sent a fresh wave of terror through the crowd. Calm procedure evaporated. It became a stampede. Alastair's hand locked around Elara's wrist, his grip like iron. "Stay with me. Do not let go of Leo." He shoved his way through the throng, not towards the lifeboats on the upper decks, but down. "Our life jackets are in the suite," he yelled over the din. "And the emergency kit." Elara's mind raced. The emergency kit. Her mother's rule. Isabel had been a marine biologist, a woman who respected the ocean's fury. On every beach holiday, every boat trip, she had packed a waterproof duffel, a first aid kit, water-purifying tablets, a multi-tool high-protein rations, a hand-crank radio, a satellite messenger. A joke to Alastair, an obsession to Isabel. After she died of a swift and brutal cancer 2 years ago, Alastair had packed the kit away, out of sight, a painful reminder. But Elara, inheriting her mother's pragmatic fear, had dug it out and insisted on bringing it. Her father had relented with a sigh, calling it morbid. Now it was their only hope. Their stateroom was on deck 5. The corridors, usually wide and opulently carpeted, were choked with people running in the opposite direction, towards the stairs, fighting their way up. The ship groaned again, a long, agonized sound of metal being tortured. The lights flickered, died, and then the emergency strips along the floor flared to life, casting a hellish red glow. They burst into their suite. The elegant room was a disaster. A minibar had burst open, scattering miniature bottles. A vase of lilies had slid off a table, shattering on the tilted floor. Water sloshed around their ankles, water from inside the ship. "Get the jackets," Alastair commanded, lunging for the wardrobe. He tossed Elara and Leo their bright orange vests before shrugging into his own. His fingers, usually so deft with spreadsheets, fumbled with the straps. Elara didn't bother with hers. She waded to the closet, yanked open the door, and grabbed the bright yellow waterproof duffel bag. She slung it over her shoulder, its weight a comforting anchor. "Leave it," Alastair shouted. "It's too heavy." "No," Elara's voice was sharper than she intended. It was the last piece of her mother she had. She wouldn't abandon it. A tremendous crash echoed from somewhere deep below, and the ship lurched violently. The tilt increased to a steep slope. Leo screamed as he lost his footing and slid across the wet floor, crashing into a sofa. "Leo," Alistair scrambled for his son, hauling him up. "We have to go, now." They fought their way back into the corridor, which was now a river of cold, dark seawater. The crowd had thinned, replaced by a terrifying new sight, water pouring down stairwells, gushing from ventilation shafts. The Odysseus was dying, and it was drinking itself full of the ocean. The journey to the lifeboat deck was a nightmare ascent. They climbed against the angle of the sinking ship, using handrails, door frames, anything to pull themselves up. The air grew thick with the smell of salt, fuel, and fear. The once confident passengers were now a terrified herd, their finery soaked and ruined. Elara saw a woman in a dripping evening gown praying on her knees, a man trying to use a champagne bottle as a lever to pry open a jammed door. They finally burst out onto the open deck. The scene was chaos underlit by the emergency lights. The sheer scale of the disaster hit Elara like a physical blow. The deck was at a severe angle, making it hard to stand. Lifeboats hung askew, some half-lowered and tangled in their davits, others already gone. Crew members, their faces masks of desperation, tried to maintain order, but it was a lost cause. "Women and children first, to the boats!" An officer was yelling, his voice hoarse. A lifeboat was being loaded nearby. Alistair pushed Elara and Leo towards it. Get in now." "Dad, come with us," Leo wailed, clinging to his father's leg. "I'll get on the next one, Leo. I promise. Now go." He pried Leo's hands loose and practically threw him into the arms of a crewman, who bundled the sobbing boy into the crowded boat. He turned to Elara, his face grim in the red light. He grabbed her shoulders. "Elara, listen to me. You are your mother's daughter. You are smart. You are strong. You look after your brother. You survive. Do you understand me? You survive." He kissed her forehead, a hard, desperate gesture. Then he pushed her towards the boat. She stumbled, the duffel bag throwing off her balance. A crewman grabbed her arm to steady her and help her in, as she clambered over the gunwale. The lifeboat gave a violent shudder. The davit wires, strained by the unnatural angle of the ship, screamed in protest. One of them snapped. The lifeboat dropped one side first, swinging wildly and slamming into the hull of the Odysseus with a crash of fiberglass and screams. People were thrown from their seats. Elara was flung backwards, out of the boat, over the railing. For a moment, she was airborne, suspended in the cold night air above the churning black water. She saw the enormous, lit-up scale of the dying ship below her. She saw the lifeboat, dangling brokenly. She saw her father's face, a tiny, horrified mask of despair, watching her fall. Then the Atlantic swallowed her whole. The cold was an electric shock that stole the breath from her lungs. It was a cold beyond comprehension, a brutal, mind-numbing assault. The weight of the life jacket fought to pull her back up, but the duffel bag, still strapped to her, dragged her down. She kicked wildly, thrashing towards the shimmering surface that seemed a mile away. She broke through, gasping, choking on salt water and diesel fumes. The noise was deafening. The screams of the drowning, the roar of escaping air from the ship, the cacophony of alarms still blaring their useless warnings. The Odysseus was a dying leviathan. It was listing heavily, its stern rising out of the water, revealing the massive, mangled propellers that had failed it. Lights flickered and died across its vast length. Lifeboats, tiny orange specks, dotted the water, some moving away, others swamped and still. "Leo," she screamed, her voice a raw scratch. "Dad." A wave slapped her in the face, filling her mouth with bitter water. She spun in the water, trying to orient herself. She was too far from the lifeboat she'd fallen from. She couldn't see her brother. She couldn't see her father. A deep, thrumming vibration passed through the water, a final death rattle. Then, with a sound that would haunt her forever, a colossal, wet tearing, the Odysseus began its final descent. The bow plunged beneath the waves, and the stern lifted higher, until it was nearly vertical against the night sky, a black silhouette against the stars. It hung there for a terrifying moment, a tombstone for over 1,000 souls. Then, With a vast sigh of inrushing water, it slid beneath the surface. The suction was immediate and terrifying. It was like a hand grabbing her ankles, pulling her down into the vortex the ship had left behind. She fought against it, kicking with every ounce of strength she had, but it was useless. The ocean was claiming its prize, and she was part of it. She was dragged under, down into the freezing, black silence, the world of light and air and screaming vanishing above her. This is it, she thought, her mind strangely calm. I'm going to die. I'm going to see Mum. But her mother's face, stern and loving, appeared in her mind's eye. You are your mother's daughter. You survive. With a final, desperate burst of energy, she ripped at the straps of the duffel bag. It was an anchor, dragging her to the depths. She couldn't let it go. It was all she had left, but it was killing her. Her fingers, numb with cold, fumbled. The suction was lessening. The ship was gone. She kicked again, and her head broke the surface once more. She gasped, vomiting seawater. The duffel was still attached. She hadn't been able to do it. She hadn't been able to let her mother go. The scene around her was a vision of hell. The sea was littered with debris, deck chairs, splintered wood, suitcases, and bodies. The screams were fewer now, the cold and the waves claiming people quickly. The air was getting colder. She was alone in the vast, dark Atlantic. A wave lifted her up, and for a moment she saw something. A dark shape not too far away, a piece of wreckage, a hope. Summoning a strength she didn't know she possessed, she began to swim, each stroke a agony of cold and exhaustion. The duffel bag was a nightmare, but it was also her life. She couldn't abandon it. As she drew closer, she saw it was a lifeboat. But it was overturned, its rounded hull riding the waves. A few people were clinging to it, their hands white-knuckled on the handholds along the keel. "Help," she croaked, her voice barely a whisper. A head turned. A young man, maybe a few years older than her, his face pale and terrified. He reached out a hand. "Grab on." She paddled the last few feet, and his cold fingers closed around her wrist. With his help and her last ounce of strength, she hauled herself up, collapsing against the slippery, curved fiberglass. She fumbled with frozen fingers to secure herself to a handhold. There were 4 others. The young man who'd helped her, an older woman in a soaked fur coat, shivering uncontrollably, a large, silent man with a bleeding cut on his forehead, and huddled in a ball, making a small, whimpering sound. Leo. Elara scrambled across the hull, slipping on the wet surface, and wrapped her arms around her little brother. He was ice cold, his lips blue, but he was alive. He clung to her, sobbing. "The boat, it tipped over," he stammered through chattering teeth. "Everyone fell in the water. I held on tight." She held him, rocking him, pouring what little warmth she had into him. She had failed her father, but she had found Leo. The mission he had given her was still alive. The young man who had helped her spoke. "I'm Noah, worked in the engine room." He gestured to the others. "This is Maria, and that's Ben." The large man gave a slight, pained nod. Maria, the older woman, just stared into the middle distance, muttering in what sounded like Italian. "How long?" Elara began, but her teeth were chattering too hard to finish. Noah understood. "The ship went down fast, maybe 20 minutes since the hit. Help will come. They'll have sent a distress signal." But his eyes, scanning the empty, dark horizon, betrayed his doubt. The cold was the real enemy now. It was a silent, creeping killer. Elara knew the statistics from her mother's books. Hypothermia could claim you in minutes in water this cold. Even out of the water on this exposed hull, the wind was stealing their heat. Her mother's voice again, from a long-ago lesson. "The kit, Elara. It's not just for show." With stiff, clumsy fingers, she pulled the duffel bag towards her. The waterproof seals had held. It was dry inside. "What is that?" Noah asked. "Survival," Elara said, her voice gaining a sliver of strength. She unzipped the main compartment. There, neatly packed, was hope. She pulled out a compact, silver emergency blanket and immediately wrapped it around Leo, then another around the catatonic Maria. She handed one to Noah and Ben. "There's a first aid kit," she said to Ben, pointing to the gash on his head. He grunted in surprise and took the small kit from her. Next, she found the waterproof container of rations, high-calorie protein bars and packets of nuts. She broke a bar in half and gave it to Leo. "Eat, small bites." She passed the rest around. Noah took his with a look of profound gratitude. Then she found the prize, a handheld, water-activated EPIRB, emergency position indicating radio beacon. Her mother had splurged on the best. She held it up. "It should be broadcasting our location to satellites," she said, her voice trembling with more than just cold. "Someone will know we're here." For the first time, a flicker of genuine hope passed between them. They had a chance. A slim one, but a chance. They huddled together on the overturned hull, a tiny island of humanity in a vast, uncaring ocean. The night stretched on, an eternity of cold and fear. They took turns dozing, jerking awake from the cold, making sure no one slipped silently into the water. Elara held Leo close, the duffel bag wedged securely between them. She had lost her father. She had lost everything she knew. But she had her brother. She had her mother's wisdom in a yellow bag, and she had a ferocious, burning will to live. The first hint of dawn was a pale, gray smear on the eastern horizon when Leo, who had been silent for a long time, spoke. "Elara." "Yes, Leo." "Is Squiggles going to be okay?" She looked down. He was still clutching the soaked, stuffed octopus. She felt a lump form in her throat. "Yeah, Leo," she whispered, pulling him closer. "Squiggles is tough, just like us." The sun rose on an empty sea. No ships, no planes, just water in every direction to the edge of the world. The EPIRB's little light blinked steadily, a silent prayer sent into the void. Their ordeal was not over. It had only just begun.